Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kaufman. So we're going to revisit a Wolfdog Sanctuary that we not only spoke to on the podcast previously, but myself and a bunch of folks from Wolf Connection actually went up and visited. They are 45 minutes west of Calgary. If you're on your way to Denali National Park, it's probably a good idea to stop in and see these folks at Yamnuska. They've done incredible work. And I'm here today with the facility manager for Yamnuska since 2019, but he's been with the sanctuary since 2013. That's Joel Cates. Joel, so good to see you and talk to you again. I mean, how's everything going with you? And is it warming up, I assume, up there with you guys?
Yeah. Things are going well. I guess one thing I would mention is we're on our way to Banff National Park, not Denali.
Banff, I'm sorry, goodness.
Things out here are going really well. It's really quite busy. Things are warming up for sure. Weather-wise, so things are warming up and lots on the go as always.
I mean, I want to get into just where you grew up. I know I was reading a little bit about your bio just before we got on, and, you know, Northwestern Ontario is where you grew up. What was your childhood like, your passions? What was Joel Cates like as a young boy, young man, before we get into all the stuff and your passion for wolves and wolf dogs?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a pretty small town. The town is actually called Vermilion Bay, Northwestern Ontario. I think population was, I'm trying to remember now, I want to say it was like 300 people in total. So pretty small place, right along the Trans-Canada Highway. You blink, you've driven through it kind of deal. Not a lot going on, but one of the real kind of benefits of it is lots of outdoors. So growing up, spent pretty much all my time outside. I'm pretty thankful I grew up in a time without cell phones and a lot of technology. So it's outside or sitting inside watching TV, which really wasn't much going on. And again, a pretty remote area for sure. Tons of wildlife out there. I grew up with a huge love of the outdoors. Pretty much every minute I spent outside, and kind of got into like all sorts of motorsport stuff, racing dirt bikes and snowmobiles, and kind of all that, because that was really the only kind of things really going on in that area.
I mean, for wildlife, for anybody who's, I guess, zoom out, take a snapshot for people when you talk about wildlife, because we visited Banff also, which is such an impressive place. And obviously your sanctuary, also a very impressive place. But when you're growing up in, like you say, these remote areas and you have all this wildlife, just describe what we're talking about here. Are we talking about the full fauna, mountain lion, bear, wolf, moose? Like what are some of the things that you could feasibly run into like when you were a kid?
Yeah. So I spent tons of time outside. I was never really into hunting or anything like that. Obviously a pretty popular thing in that type of environment. But yeah, as far as wildlife goes, kind of all of the above. Locationally there's not really a lot as far as cougars go. Reportedly there are some. I've talked to a few like bush pilots in the area who's reported seeing them, but personally I never saw one myself. Bears, no grizzlies, but lots of black bears, lynx, bobcat, and yeah, definitely lots of wolves, moose, deer, all that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting because I grew up, again, a pretty big fan of wildlife. Anytime we'd see an animal like driving somewhere, like parents would pull the car over and it's like, oh my God, like look at that. And it got to the point where it was like pretty normal to see wildlife. And like, as I got a little bit older and then was exploring the areas on my own, whether it was like fishing or hiking or just out on the bike, kind of just exploring on my own, like I saw a lot of wolves. And like, at the time, I thought it was perfectly normal, but like I have seen wolves from like 30 feet away take down a deer in front of me. I've seen packs of wolves with young pups come down to the lakeside and like grab a drink of water and hang out and start howling. Like I had so many encounters with specifically wolves growing up there that it seemed quite normal and quite commonplace. And then once I moved to Alberta in early 2013, and kind of found out about the sanctuary and started talking to people, I kind of then realized, like, wow, like that's apparently not so normal to see that so regularly.
I mean, what are those experiences? What were they like for you, and what sort of place do they hold in your mind when you go back and think about that stuff? Because you're right, that's something that people, I think, here in the United States, they go to Yellowstone, they try to just get them in their scopes, and sometimes people are lucky enough to get them crossing the road or seeing them on the side of the road. But for you, it was such a normal occurrence. Where do those things hold a place for you when you go back and talk about those stories?
Yeah, so like growing up, like you ask a younger kid like what their favorite animal is, and like I had a really hard time choosing or picking one out. I always really appreciated wolves, of course, and then I think once I kind of started seeing them a little bit more often, and that's when they kind of reached the top of that list. And okay, these are my favorite animals. And yeah, it's quite interesting because even now, 20 years later, like I can still remember pretty much every single one of those encounters like so vividly in my mind. Like it's just so vividly ingrained in my memory bank because like it was such a significant thing. It obviously had some sort of impact for sure. And yeah, just thinking about it, it's like I think about, yeah, I'm really quite lucky to have been able to experience that. And at the time I didn't realize it, but now being out here and not seeing that so often, it's definitely something that comes up. And you think, yeah, like I was pretty lucky to have gone through that.
Man, when you think back on it, did you ever explore as a kid why that was, why wolves were so close, why you had these encounters? Did your parents ever discuss the reasoning? Why were you just in the perfect spot? Was there habitat being moved around? What were some of the reasons, if you remember, or if it was never explained, you were just a wolf magnet, apparently, when you were a kid?
Yeah, so like there was definitely some around for sure. Like I said, it wasn't like I would always see them in the same area or I was purposely going out kind of searching for them. It just kind of happened to be like these totally natural occurrences where we'd kind of cross paths here and there. And it wasn't like unique to me for sure, as much as I'd love to say I'm like this magnet for them. Definitely not the case. But at the time it was just kind of, oh yeah, there's wolves there, and never really explored it or looked into it too much. But once I kind of moved away and found realized that that's not such a normal thing, I definitely spent some time looking into it and talking with people back home who are still involved in hunting and stuff like that, and hearing them talking about like deer populations and all of that. It really kind of helped me be able to kind of not retrace those steps, but put things back together and kind of figure out, like you said, why there are wolves in that area and why they were moving around, and kind of like looking into things a bit more serious about like, well, what is their actual habitat preferences, like stuff like that, like where are they more likely to be, and kind of looking on Google Maps and like going through where I saw them and looking at topography and stuff like that, and really kind of retracing those steps. I know when I go back home this fall, I'm actually looking forward to actually purposely going out to see if I can find some, which is something I've never done before. So, well, it'll be interesting for sure.
I mean, you have the bases. I feel like you have a map up with the little pins, and you have little strings going back and forth so you can see where everything is. It's just so wild to be in wild spaces. It's envious, obviously, from a kid who grew up in New York and on Long Island, where tons of deer, not much else, ducks and stuff like that. But to hear folks like yourself that grow up in these really big wild spaces, not a lot of people, and you just have this wildlife that is just teeming throughout is just so incredible to hear about. So what was the impetus for you to move to Alberta in 2013 and then start to get involved and visit Yamnuska? I know that was the first time I think that you visited was around 2013. So what was the drive or the lure? What was the reason for moving, just to kind of get out of where you were? What was the deal?
Yeah, so I kind of, as I started getting a bit older, I was in my, I guess, mid-20s at the time, and I kind of got to a point where it's like, okay, I need to either like get a bit more serious and commit to buying a house here and like living out life here, or I need to look at kind of moving or getting out. And I was employed by the railway, so I worked for CN Rail at the time. Ended up being with CN for about 15 years in total. And a job position opened up in Edmonton, I had family, my sister and brother both lived in Edmonton, and I was like, before I kind of buy a buy a house here and I'm like more or less stuck here, like let's give this a go and kind of see what else is out there. So took the job transfer, moved to Edmonton, no real plan or like, yeah, this is exactly what I want. It was just, yeah, let's go try this for a bit.
Right.
And yeah, like everything was fine. I was really appreciating being a lot closer to the mountains for like snowboarding and snow machining, stuff like that. But definitely missed I found it more hard, like a lot harder to get out and just kind of be alone in nature because there's just so many more people around out here, especially when you're going to those kind of tourist areas like the mountains and whatnot. One of my coworkers kind of tipped me off about this wolf place. Didn't know really much about it, and he said it was somewhere around Banff. And like, oh, I'm going down there snowboarding anyway. So I got on Google and started looking it up. And sure enough, after a bit of a search, I was able to find it and booked a tour. I think I talked my sister into coming with me, and her and I drove down from Edmonton down this way, and visited the sanctuary for the first time, and that would have been early 2013, I believe.
Yeah. What was the thing that stood out for you initially as you walked through? Because, like I said, we coming from another Wolfdog Sanctuary in California, just really blown away about what Yamnuska stands for, the way you guys operate. What was it back then? So we're talking almost 11 years ago, roughly now. What were the things that stood out that made you decide, hey, this is a place I might want to volunteer and help out and help their cause?
Yeah, so I really had no idea what to expect. There was no real much of a website. Couldn't really get a good grasp of things from looking at it on social media, like in excitement before kind of going down to see what it was about. It's just pictures of wolf dogs. And at the time I was like, well, lots of these just look like wolves. I guess, yeah, I had no real experience with actual wolf dogs. Growing up where I grew up, a lot of people claimed they had wolf dogs, and without doing any proper education or research on my own, I was just going off of things that you hear or you kind of bump into innocently enough. And after being involved in the sanctuary for a long time now, there's a lot of misrepresentation out there. I guess we could put it that way.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so the first thing that really stood out to me after arriving in the sanctuary is it was a much smaller scale back then. It was more or less Georgina dealing with us in the backyard at her dad's house. But the one thing that really stood out at first was like seeing what real wolf dogs actually were. Because my experience with them before were, husky or Malamute mixes that people were just claiming as wolf dogs with no idea. So to go from not really seeing or knowing what a real wolf dog is to then meeting, a pack of 5 at that time was definitely an eye-opening situation. It was just quite surreal. It was really awesome because it kind of reminded me a bit of back home, like, being able to see animals like that. And of course, these are high content wolf dogs. They're not pure wolves, but the look is there, the behavior, it's a lot more than just a regular domestic dog. Another thing that stood out was that I didn't really know what to expect, but when this girl in her mid-20s comes to the door, it's like, okay, like she just works here, like she's just an employee here or something. And after the tour, which was run by Georgina, she ran all the educational programs by herself at the time. Talking to her afterwards, because I didn't listen to a single word she said. I was just focused on the dogs in front of me. I started talking to her and she's like, yeah, like this is my place, this is my thing. And it was just her all by herself doing this. And I was like thinking in my head the whole time, like, how does one person, like, how do you manage to do all of this by yourself? Like,
right.
It's crazy to me. And yeah, I was really quite captivated by Georgina, by her mission, like her purpose. It was very clear she just had an immense love for the animals, and it was really all about the animals. It was, I'm happy to, show people them. I'm happy to let people kind of see them and learn about them, but it's on their terms. She's not like, trying to get them to perform. There was no pressure on the animals. It was always just, you're in their space and you're going to respect that. And it can be a really magical thing if you're willing to let it happen. So like that really stuck with me. And anytime I was passing by, I was like, hey, I'm kind of coming through the area or whatever. Like, could I stop by and see or, hang out for a bit? And that was kind of how things progressed along there was just really being quite captivated by everything and spending a lot of time.
Man, what was the first experience for you there? Was there a specific wolf dog, either on that first trip or in the first couple of times that you went, that stuck out for you, that obviously the allure of the beginning stages of what Yamnuska was obviously captivated you? Was there a specific wolf dog that also was tugging at you a little bit, that also drew you in?
Absolutely. So, like Zeus, unfortunately passed just a short while ago, but Zeus was just such a presence. He's like this large black wolf dog. He's kind of the leader of that pack, so to speak. So he just had like an immense presence about him. Like even just being in his space, like the way he walked, the way he moved, it was just he just had a presence. I don't know any better way to describe it. And of course there was Kuna, and Kuna, the very first visit, kind of just, I don't want to say she really like snuffed us, but she kind of just laid hanging out in her wolf ball and was like, yeah, I don't really need to get up and see you guys. And that was it.
Right.
But the one that really stuck with me is, I think it's my second visit there to the sanctuary. And I remember messaging Georgina and be like, hey, I'm gonna, book a time slot on this tour. And she was like, no, like, just don't worry about it. Like, just stop by the house and like, we'll hang out for a bit. So we were hanging out in the house, and the enclosure butts right up against the house. Like you'd open the patio doors and the dogs will come in the house if they're comfortable enough. At that time, it's really just Kuna, Nova occasionally would go in the house, I guess. But I remember looking out the windows at them, and I was like, do you let them inside? And she's like, oh yeah. And she opened the patio door, and she's like, because you're here and like none of them really know you, like none of them are going to come inside. Like they're just not going to be comfortable enough to come inside. So we were just sitting there on the couch kind of talking, and then all of a sudden Kuna walked in. And Georgina was like, oh, okay, like she doesn't normally do that with people she doesn't really know inside here. And she ended up just walking right up and like allowed me to pet her like while we were just kind of sitting on the couch. And Georgina, like for me, it was like, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. I was like really pumped about it. And I looked over at Georgina and I could tell she was like really, really surprised that she was that comfortable with me. And like, in that environment and in that particular setting, she was just like, oh, okay, yeah, she must like you, I guess.
I mean, what does that say just for you? Because I mean, we teach this at our place, and I'm sure you guys on some level too, is it's really about the energy in the room, and it's really about the energy of the person. And so for that to happen, I'm sure there was multiple levels and multiple things happening at once inside of the three bodies in the room, that Kuna was like, hey, this is all right. It's a good situation. I mean, that's got to be something on another level, as opposed to you seeing, and we met Kuna too when we came. I mean, Kuna is high content. For those of you that, please take a look at any of the videos or pictures they have of her. What was that? Obviously, clearly you're touching a high content wolf dog. But was there anything else that sort of stirred up for you that like, hey, this is an actual thing that I could possibly be doing down the line?
Yeah. So at that time, I don't think it was ever like in my brain about like, as far as like long-term sustainable employment or anything along those lines. It was just like, in the moment, really just completely lost. I mean, Kuna was like, she is such a presence as well, very similar to Zeus, but like we always joke, she's a bit of a diva. Like everything is her way. She's a real true high content wolf dog in that kind of personality, that it's her way or the highway. So in the moment, I was just like, wow, like this is so very clearly different than any domestic dog or any claimed wolf dog I had met up until that point. So, just really kind of absorbing all of that. But then as I started kind of learning more and more about what real wolf dogs were like, just kind of realizing, and like you said, the temperament and the energy of people, it's, as you figure this out and you spend more time with these animals, it's something you learn that you're never able to force it. You could never be like, okay, this wolf dog, or pick one and we're going to be best buddies. It doesn't work that way with wolf dogs. Like, some of them are a little bit more social or a little bit more outgoing than others, but it is still on their terms. It's still not something that you can just walk up to a high content wolf dog and be like, yeah, you and I, we're going to be friends. It doesn't work that way. So the fact that she was, open and kind of picked up on that energy, I guess, it was a really special moment, just like seeing wolves out in the wild when I grew up. It was something that's very much ingrained in my, seared in my memory forever, for sure.
Oh man. I wonder too for you when you're learning and you're taking in all this information as you continue to go down, or you continue to go down the path, obviously, of volunteering and helping out. And as Yamnuska starts to grow, what were some of the things you were surprised that, I guess the misconceptions, because we were talking about this prior to starting recording, that you were hearing from folks maybe about wolf dogs, and you even mentioned it, right? People thinking that huskies or malamutes or the crossbreeds between them were actual wolf dogs, when in fact they're not. So what are some of the things that you were hearing during that time, and even now, that you have to try and gently, I guess, debunk or just correct so that people are aware, hey, there is a difference here between an actual wolf dog that has wolf mix in there as opposed to the domestic cousins where we talk about huskies and malamutes and such?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a huge list of differences, and I mean, both physically and behaviorally, for sure. I think one of the big ones that it seems like a lot of people, unless they have a lot of experience or they've actually spent even a bit of time kind of looking at them in terms just physical traits of differences between them. Like, we've had so many times where someone would be like, "Oh, that looks just like my Malamute," and it's like, no, it doesn't. Like, it's just they're not even close. And then people are open to it. It's another thing, you can never force someone to want to learn or take in information they refuse or anything like that. So that's always a bit tricky, for sure. But for people who are open to it, and they, like, we've had visitors who are like, well, look at my dog on my phone, and you start looking at it, and you can like hold up the phone behind, like, and look at another wolf dog behind the phone and be like, well, do you see these differences? And they're like, oh yeah, like, I never even noticed these things. So there's definitely a huge misconceptions out there. I mean, especially, again, physically, there's some pretty big traits, and it doesn't take a lot of research or effort to really start picking up on how different they are physically. But behaviorally, that's where things change immensely. Even a low content wolf dog, which we have a few here at the sanctuary as well, like, low content wolf dogs do behave a good bit differently than most domestic dogs as well. And I think for all those so-called wolf dogs I met, and it wasn't very many, maybe 5 or so growing up. At the time, it's like, wow, like, these are so interesting and so fascinating. But without me doing any research on my own, Google wasn't even a thing at the time. It didn't exist. Whereas,
Right.
like, now it's so much easier to kind of find that information and get it informed and educated about it. But back then, like, it was just like, okay, this is what this person is telling me, that's what we're going with. Whereas now, looking back on that, it's like, wow, that wasn't even close to a wolf dog. Like, that wasn't even a low content wolf dog. This is just a husky mix type thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we find a lot of that too, where we see even our low contents they act more like the wild wolves than they do the domestic dog side, and you try and give them the space to do that because that's probably more of it's really the more natural way for them to survive and live, as opposed to being a domestic partner to somebody in a home and stuff like that. I mean, that's what we've seen, is that if you cater towards the wild side, it's usually better off for the wolf or the wolf dog, so that they're able to do their own thing. I don't know if you guys see that too. I know Georgina probably spoke a little bit about that last time we spoke to her. But do you see that when you guys ever intake new wolf dogs, that there's a specific way to do it? You guys give them space, you do whatever you got to do, and I want to get into obviously some of the stuff that's been happening with you guys, kind of an update. But what's been your experience over the years, just to see from your perspective how you guys handle those situations?
Yeah, I'll 100% agree with you. Like, embracing that kind of wild side that they have, it's critically important to their complete well-being, like their mental well-being, their physical well-being. That's something that they need to have and they need to embrace for sure. So allowing them and giving them the space to do so, that's critically important in my opinion as well. And again, that it applies even to low content wolf dogs. And sure, it's going to be a little bit less intense or a little bit on a lesser scale for a low content wolf dog than a high content wolf dog for sure. For example, we have some low content wolf dogs that walk wonderfully on collar and leash, and they do fine in public areas and stuff like that. So we will still do stuff like that with them occasionally, but you can tell at the end of the day when you pop them back in their enclosure with their pack mates, they're like, oh, thank God that's over. I'm happy I'm back home. It's kind of like after you get home from work, so to speak, where you can just like kick off the shoes and relax. So we have some low content wolf dogs that are like that. Like Loki, he's one, for example, like I've taken him on lots of different hikes. We've done some outreach stuff, and yeah, every time you'd get home and pop him back into his enclosure, you see that embrace between him and his pack mates. And even in terms of like, one big adjustment I had is, growing up with domestic dogs, it's like, oh, it's raining out, or, oh, it's a bit cold out. Like, we better get the dogs inside. And I remember with the high content wolf dogs, like being right next to the house, it's like Georgina, like, it's cold. Like, should we see about getting them in? And she's like, no, like there's no way they're coming in the house. Like, it's just not possible. They're not going to be comfortable with it. So, learning that was definitely something as well. Like, just seeing that they kind of thrive and do so well with those types of environments and those types of settings. And I mean, it's not like, we're getting to like -50 where, it's anything extreme or anything like that. But even our low content wolf dog, Loki, on the cold days in the wintertime, I'll give him the opportunity to come in the house and sleep with us because, he's getting a bit older and make it easier for him. And I'd say probably 70% of the time, given the choice to come inside where it's warm in the wintertime or sleeping outside in the snow in his doghouse with his pack mates, it's 70% of the time he'd rather sleep outside. So
rather outside.
Like you said, embracing that kind of wild side of them, it's definitely, like I said, critically important for sure.
What is it, or what was it like for you, especially when you go from the place where Georgina started, basically back out off the side of her house, to the facility and the sanctuary that you guys have now, as somebody who I'm sure is tasked with, upkeep and figuring out enclosure space? What was that? How did that go for you as you sort of stepped into that role, and were you helping out in laying the foundations, I guess, for how to, figure out the spaces for them and the gate types and the enclosures? We were there and there was some new spaces being put together. What's that like for you and in your brain to be able to help put that together? What's the process like for that?
Yeah, so moving here, we moved here again together. Georgina had already purchased property, but at the time that I met her, like, there was no enclosures. It was literally just a house on some land. So when we came here, it was, okay, we need to get a couple enclosures. So I was pretty inexperienced at that time as far as wolf dogs go. As I mentioned, I didn't have a lot of experience with wolf dogs at all. So the first two enclosures we built, we kind of built those before moving in, and moved in with that original pack of 5 that she had at the former location. And it was kind of like, okay, we've got this set up. We've got a completely vacant extra enclosure for incoming rescues. Like, yeah, like we'll be set for a while. And then it seemed like neither of us had any idea what or how quickly things were going to expand and grow. And I mean, even looking back, like sometimes we look back at photos of what this place was like when we first moved here, and it's like, it's hard to imagine how far we have come and the rate of growth for sure. So those first few enclosures, it was kind of just the standard thing that Georgina had set up at her former place. One thing that I was really impressed with is that the enclosures are, in my opinion, really big. Each one, I think the smallest one we have is about 1.5 acres, all the way up to 4 acres. So I was instantly like, okay, this is not like any normal like dog kennel, like these are massive spaces. to keep these animals happy. And Georgina, that was kind of always one of the main goals, is that they're not going to be stressed out. They're not going to be placed into spaces that anyone would deem as too small. And then as things expanded, we kind of visited a few different other like wildlife type places over the years, and kind of looked and saw what a few people were doing, and saw some things we liked, some things we didn't like, and we're like, okay, well, when we're building these next few enclosures, we're going to keep making them large, but we definitely kind of learned some things as we're going along. Our newest generation of enclosures, for example, instead of being like wood posts, the entire fence line, like all the posts are recycled drill stems. So we're able to kind of recycle that. But as far as like in terms of like fireproofing things, I mean, those things are never going to burn. Like they're never going to rot. They're never going to rust. Like so much more robust. And then even with dig guards, instead of dig guards being like extended across the surface of the ground and then being partially backfilled, like now all the dig guards are dug down like 4 feet deep into the ground and then backfilled. So from a containment perspective, even in just pure security terms, like things are definitely a lot more secure, a lot more robust, that we've figured out as we've gone. And yeah, like the layout and the growth has been pretty insane. We did 3 enclosures already, 3 new enclosures already this year. The next 3 are going to be getting started probably mid to late August. That's 6 new enclosures already. And yeah, it's really ramping up around here for sure.
How does I want to try and ask this question correctly. So when you're seeing this, and I really, anybody who has not been to Yamnuska and who's listening to this, please go and see this facility, and meet Joel, and you'll meet Georgina and the staff there. They're wonderful. What's the planning route for you guys? Is it, we're going to make the enclosures first before we get the influx? And obviously things evolve over time. How do you figure out where to plot things? Because there was a good part that Georgina, when she was walking us around, in the back part of the sanctuary were some of the more, I want to say, sensitive wolf dogs that people could only go up to a certain fence, and that was it, because they don't really take too well to human contact or even human presence to a degree. What's the planning process in order to make sure, okay, how do you plot it out? What's the thought process behind it all, I guess, is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So in the early days, I think we were maybe a little bit naive, in the sense that I remember one year, and this was pretty early on. I want to say it was within the first probably 3 or 4 years for sure of being at this location here now. We finally came up with enough funding to build. So we had 2 enclosures, and we were going to build 3 more. And I remember it was like, oh my God, like we're going to build 3 new enclosures. We don't have any wolf dogs slated to go in there. Like we'll be set for years. Like, it'll take forever to fill these. Like future wise, we're going to be in a really good place. And before the first one was even done, there's a few more rescues coming in, and it's like, okay, that one's full. And then come home and with these new wolf dogs, and okay, that one's full. And like they just got filled up immediately. I think it was within like 4 months, maybe 5 months, those 3 new enclosures that were totally vacant were full. And we're both just like, man, like we just built those thinking like we'd be good for a while, and here it's like months later and we're already at capacity again. So as much as we try to like always have like a full enclosure ready to go, it's been like so hard to do. It seems like we're typically always running around at capacity, and that's never what we want. We never want to turn away a wolf dog in need. We never want to say no to a rescue. This year we've taken in 22 wolf dogs this year alone. So the growth is just crazy. And fortunately, we're not in a situation where we've ever had to say no where an animal was euthanized. We're really happy about that. But with our last rescue, taking in the 15 and then the 6 pups that showed up, we were at capacity. We had no spots, and that rescue came up in like November. and now ground is frozen, and it's like we can't even get the dig guards in because the ground is frozen. Fortunately, our fencers, they're really awesome. They're really on our side as far as trying to do absolutely everything for us. So they kind of dropped everything they had on the go. We were able to build like a short-term spot for these new rescues to come in. So each one of these, we call them our rescue pens. So they're 40 feet by 80 feet. So they're small for sure, not something that an animal is ever going to live in long term, but it's perfect to have a new rescue come in where you can then work with them, kind of assess them behaviorally, physically. If they had to go through any vet stuff or medical stuff, it's a small space that they can recover without, running around too much or being too rambunctious. But we got those built, and then like I said, we've built 3 new enclosures so far this year. The next 2 are going to be going up soon, and that will pretty much just put us right back at capacity. So I'm sure next year there's going to be more enclosures. It seems like every year we're doing more and more. We've never done 6 in a year before. That's definitely a record for us. And then the other thing you touched on is, trying to keep in mind some of those more sensitive wolf dogs. So with us being a rescue, as I'm sure you're aware, some wolf dogs come in from places that are really quite terrible. We've had some wolf dogs come from places where I never want to visit or go see or be exposed to that type of environment ever again in my life. We've had some rescues come in from places that were some of the most horrible things I've ever seen as far as animals go. And those wolf dogs, like some of them, you put them in enclosures and they're like, you can see an instant change. Some of them really come around real quick, but others, some of them, it just takes them forever to really kind of come around and really start trusting people again. So we have some wolf dogs that are really shy and really sensitive. And one of our big goals here at the sanctuary is not forcing animals to do something they're not comfortable with. So with those shy and sensitive wolf dogs, we've got enclosures that are, like you had mentioned, kind of off the beaten pathway, so that if someone's standing right at their fence line, they're not going to be stressed out by that. They're not going to be, forced into a situation or something they're not comfortable with. We have certain enclosures where instead of being able to walk like a 360 all the way around that enclosure, maybe you can only see one side of it. So if those animals are feeling a little bit bolder, they can come up to that fence line. But if there's something going on that they're not super comfortable with, well, now they have the ability to retreat back into that 2-acre enclosure that they've got. So they've got the ability to make the choice for themselves. So that's something that's really important for us. And it's always a bit of a tricky situation because, like I said, we have all these new enclosures going on, but on the same hand, public education and having the public visit us is huge. That's how we do a lot of things here. That's what keeps the lights on. That's what keeps us rescuing wolf dogs. So we build all these new enclosures, but now on the back end, we need to extend pathways. We need to think about the human element for this as well. So it's always a bit of like a back and forth. We grow the sanctuary in terms of taking in wolf dogs, but then it's like, okay, well, now we need to update the infrastructure for humans to enjoy the experience as well. So it's definitely a unique challenge for sure, trying to kind of balance those two things out.
You are 100%. We feel the same thing because it's all about balancing the human wolf element, right? Like what's going to be covered, and you said it perfectly, is balancing the comfort of the wolves and the wolf dogs to make sure they're okay first. And then, oh boy, we got to figure out on the back end, the educational piece. Where does that sit for you guys sometimes? Is there a waiting period? I know, like you said, and we do the same thing where they land in sort of an ACE, like an acclimation enclosure, just to get settled. They don't really meet any of the visitors and stuff first time or second time go around. Where do you find, and then do they move directly into a bigger enclosure? I probably asked Georgina this, but what are you seeing and how have you seen it go as you've expanded with these bigger enclosures? Because to me, that's a beautiful space for wolf dogs to be in, acres big, so that they can, like you said, make their own choice.
Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to that kind of initial assessment. Sometimes when we're doing rescues, the owners are really, I don't know how to say it, like normal people, down to earth. They're willing to provide you with as much information and insight as possible. And you can tell pretty quickly what type of owner they were based upon how those animals are, both physically and mentally. Like, you see some where the people like can't get anywhere near these animals, and it's like, you've had this wolf dog all its life and it's terrified of you. Like, so there's always that kind of assessment first. Sometimes we've got where we're doing a rescue and we do have like one of our large enclosures ready to go, for example. If we know those wolf dogs are going to be in they're in a good physical state, mental state, then yeah, sure, we'll get them right into one of those like multi-acre enclosures right off the get-go. Generally, though, those new rescues come in and we put them in those rescue recovery pens right off the get-go. So they're totally away from the public. It's a little bit of a smaller space. So again, if they needed to have a spay or neuter or anything like that, they've got the opportunity to recover there. But then also we can spend our own time working with them and get our own evaluation of them too. Because we have had it where we weren't necessarily missold a wolf dog, but we've had a number of times where when we're doing these rescues, the owners are kind of telling you, oh yeah, they do this, it's great, they're like this perfect dog, everything's good. And I think they know it's, being exaggerated a fair bit, but they're doing it because they want their wolf dogs to come here, So we always kind of take what we're told with maybe a bit of a grain of salt. So when we get them home, we kind of like to do that assessment on our own terms and really figure out exactly what we're dealing with behaviorally. And, from there, we can figure out what that animal likes. Are they super comfortable with people? So, if they're in one of those enclosures that has fence lines all the way around it, are they going to be happy with that? Are they going to be comfortable with that? Or is it, like I said, one of those ones that's just super shy, super shut down the second it has anything to do with a human interaction? Well, okay, we'll put them in a bigger enclosure, but it's going to be further off of those pathways. So those are, some of the kind of bigger things for us for sure, but that's typically how we tend to do things. I will say, and I know Georgina's mentioned this a number of times as well over the years, but I think one of the greatest things ever is to have some wolf dogs or a wolf dog that maybe come from a really terrible place. We put them in our rescue recovery pens, make sure they're healthy, get them up to weight or whatever it may take. But to have wolf dogs come in that have essentially lived their however many years of their lives in a jail cell, something that's like maybe 6 feet by 10 feet or smaller, as we've seen, and to give them like a 2-acre enclosure that's full of trees and everything else, and like let them out of those crates for the first time, it is just like a crazy thing. It is so amazing to see like that behavioral transformation, like to see them just instantly like feel free. They can actually run for the first time. It's one of the greatest things.
I mean, you're giving them new life. Essentially, they're being reborn at your sanctuary, and we've seen that too. I mean, it's. I can agree with you there. It's one of the best feelings is when they, and like you say, they give it sort of an exhale, and they just relax, and you go, okay, you're okay here. We're going to make sure that everything is fine, and whatever it is. We've had some wolf dog owners that have done decently for their wolf dogs, and they come here. It's just a different situation where they're in a bigger space and they're going to be getting fed whatever they're going to be getting fed and vet care and whatever it is. And so it's always great to be a part of that next part of their story, so that it's not just about what happened prior to that. I want to go back just to the building part of it real quick, because I know you guys, when we were out there in November, it was cold. What is your building window like? Because if you have to put up, like you said, you rescued that 15. I remember following you guys when you had that big rescue of 15, and then you get the puppies. What is your timeline? Do you have from, say, I don't even know when it thaws up there enough for you guys to do what you need to do? Is it basically May to August? How many months, or what's the timeline in order for you guys to get any sort of major construction done so that you're as prepared as you can be?
Yeah, so enclosure wise, it does. I mean, it always varies a little bit year to year, but I'd say it's probably March, April. is kind of typically the soonest you can get started. This year, because of like kind of the urgency of things, like again, our fencers, it's called Oztech. The company's called Oztech Fencing. They've done our last, I'm not even sure how many enclosures for us. So we've got a really good working relationship. They were on board with us getting started as soon as physically possible. So they were out here even before the ground was fully thawed, like getting as much done as possible.
Wow.
And yeah, things like progress at that point when you're dealing with like snow days or where it's freezing cold, like progress is slower for sure, but we're able to work through it. And a real testament to those guys, like they're willing to work through it. Whereas, you know, we've seen a lot of other companies that it's like, no, it's not ideal. We're not going to do it until this date when we know things are good, kind of thing. So we're pretty happy with that. And then on the back end of things, typically anything past like, you know, late September, mid-October is when things start getting dicey. And in a sense that if you know, in mid-October, if you open the ground to dig in buried dig guards or something like that and things start freezing, it's like you have a big problem on your hands. And anything beyond that, then yeah, you've got to be really careful about how much you're planning on doing, because you might get half of it done, you might not get any of it done. So that's kind of like our window as far as like enclosure stuff goes. So yeah, we try to do as much as we can in any single year, but it is definitely a short window there for sure. Because I mean, we do have pretty decent winters here.
Oh yeah, trust me. I'm wishing now that I'm back up there in November. I can tell you that I'm sweating over. It's because we're in the 80s and 90s now, and I'm like, please just get us to October, please. For you though, on a day-to-day basis, what are the things that you're always looking for? Are you casing the facility or the sanctuary and making sure, you know, everything, obviously all the locks and stuff work, but are you more of a planner and sort of looking at a global stage for the sanctuary and say, okay, we're going to be building X, Y, and Z enclosures. We're going to be doing these enrichment items. I do want to touch on the tug of war thing that I saw on your Instagram, which I thought is brilliant. It's such a great thing, enriching wise, not only for the wolf dogs, but the humans. Where do you sit as a day-to-day manager and making sure that everything is running, you know, tight ship, and then also, I guess, planning in the future for anything new that may come along?
Yeah. So with that, like it's definitely not just like me doing any of it. Like we are a small team here for sure, but we've got a really solid team here. So Georgina's kind of obviously at the forefront. She's the one who's running the ship for sure. But I think we're both pretty fortunate. We both work really well together. We have a personal relationship for 10 plus years now, and living together and working together, it's gone really well. That was always a bit of a concern in the early days, is like, oh my God, is this going to be too much? But yeah, fortunately we figured that out. So Georgina generally handles a lot of the admin stuff, the business stuff, which I know she's not always super psyched about, but it's unfortunately the role she's kind of growing into. So she always she's pretty happy anytime she can spend time with the animals, whereas before it was always with the animals. So in that growth, that's kind of one give and take she's had. For me, you know, there's definitely always an element of animal care. So every day our staff, we kind of go through all the enclosures and make sure all the animals are happy and healthy, the enclosures are secure. And then after that, for me, it's a bit of planning. When it comes to new enclosures, Georgina, myself, and Alex, who's our operations manager, will kind of have a talk about like what's actually feasible to do within the scope of a year. After that, it's kind of up to me to figure out like where these next enclosures should go. I'll kind of scope out the best locations for them and present that to Georgina. Then her and I usually go for a walk around and actually get eyes on, you know, the spaces I'm thinking of, so that way there I've got someone to kind of poke holes in anything I potentially would have missed. Outside of that, a lot of maintenance, a lot of upkeep. You know, we have things to worry about. Like I mentioned, one of the things we're currently going through is extending and upgrading some of our pathways for visitors to explore. So we did do a bunch of, a few years ago, when we first started, it was all just like a grass pathway, and that was fine. But once you start having the number of visitors we have, well, that grass turned to mud pretty quick. So, and wanting to stick with an accessibility theme and having the sanctuary be able to, anyone out there being able to enjoy the sanctuary, accessibility, mobility, no restrictions there. So we did a bit of an upgrade to the pathways, and now we're kind of in phase 3 of that, where we're going from like gravel pathways to like fully asphalt pathways, because from the volume of traffic we have from humans and just dealing with the maintenance of it, anytime it snows, someone's got to go remove all the snow from these pathways. So that someone is generally me. So trying to, keep projects like that in scope and in line, and making sure that we're able to kind of follow through with stuff like that is another kind of one of my roles. Again, enclosure security is another big thing. So if we have trees that need to be removed from enclosures, it's not like you can just call an arborist to come in and just, go in there with those 5 high content wolf dogs and make sure a tree doesn't fall on a fence. So I've learned how to become an arborist as well. And, that's another trick up the sleeve for sure. And then, also just trying to kind of plan out different enrichment stuff, whether it's building new platforms for the wolf dogs to kind of hang out on, in-ground swimming pools. Another one we've recently been really putting a lot of effort into is underground water lines, so that we can basically just flip a valve from the outside of the enclosure and remote start filling one of their pools that they have set up in the summertime. Instead of what we used to do in the past is dragging out like hundreds of feet of garden hose that usually ends up getting chewed at least once a year. A wolf dog will grab one or get a little too close to one. So, kind of just trying to enhance everything, not only for us, but the public as well, and then also the wolf dogs, so that we're kind of trying to make it easier for everyone throughout. I know whenever I do have some free time, I like to do a lot of like looking around online just for some different inspiration, different ideas. There's so many different facilities out there that I'll see like, wow, look at like this kind of like treehouse, doghouse thing they built for the wolf dogs. Like, that's so cool. And, try to come up with something similar or our own take on it. And that, I will say, is kind of, in my opinion, one of the hardest things about my job or my role here at the sanctuary is I feel like I never really have enough time to do all the things I want to do. It's been like on my dream list for years to put in like a massive kind of pond or small type lake in one of the enclosures that the dogs or people could, like myself, I guess, could like fully swim in, We do have like a bit of a fountain, and we do have like small pools in all of the enclosures for the wolf dogs to jump in, but to have something like, like a huge pond that they could like fully properly swim in and stuff like that, like those are kind of things that I've constantly got kind of cooking up in my brain that is on the future to-do list, but the future to-do list is a very long list for sure.
I mean, everything that you guys are doing, though, anyway, is incredible in terms of, like you say, just the future planning, the way you guys map things out. It's always well thought out. And we, again, just blown away by how you guys are able to handle that stuff with the small team that you have. And it's obviously measured, everything that you guys are doing. And just from hearing you talk about just about new enrichment items and the way that you guys piece that stuff together and, to make it operate and work well. I mean, that's really what it's about, is making sure that, like you said, it works well for both the humans and the wolf dogs, especially making sure that you can function, in a sanctuary in a way that's going to be conducive for everybody to be, happy and healthy. Talk about this tug of war thing, because I saw that and they posted about it. So I have to ask, what was the inspiration for it? And anybody, I know, have you guys started selling? Is it like a ticket thing, or what was the inspiration to do this one and to make sure that it's safe enough for folks to come up and see this and do this with any certain pack mates, I would imagine?
Yeah. So Alex, our operations manager, she, I think last year was the first year we started doing it fully. She came up with the idea of, so every day we do different forms of enrichment for the wolf dogs that are available for the public to see. So we do that on a daily basis, multiple times a day here every day at the sanctuary. One thing Alex kind of thought up was like, well, with enrichment, like you can kind of do a few simple things, or you can do kind of bigger, more grand things. So she came up with the idea of doing like wild enrichment. That's what we've called it. So the first Saturday of every month, we do a much larger, much more elaborate form of enrichment for a specific pack that might suit that pack better. Some of the examples in the past, we've had like frozen fish donated, like completely whole frozen fish. And some of our stock tanks are like a 14-foot diameter, and we'd put the frozen fish into the stock tank and the dogs would have to go fish them out. A different one I came up with recently was during hunting season, a lot of hunters donate like leftover stuff they can't utilize. So like rib cages or leg bones or stuff like that. That's kind of waste for them, but the wolf dogs really love being able to chew on that. So one I came up with this year was, I guess earlier this year, was suspending rib cages up in the tree where they had to pull on a rope that would drop it from the trees to the ground. So that it was like a lot of problem solving for the wolf dogs. And it's really interesting to see how they respond to these things, because you can cook up like some crazy ideas. And like, I know the first time I built a platform for the wolf dogs, I spent, I don't even know how long building like this giant play structure. And I'm like, man, this thing is so cool. It's going to be awesome. And we let the wolf dogs back in and they were terrified of it for like probably 4 days. They wouldn't go near it. And I remember being so sad about it because like I spent so much effort on it. So it's always a bit of thinking in terms of like, what do I think is really going to be cool, or are the wolf dogs actually going to really actually enjoy this? The tug of war thing. So at the start of every year, Georgina, Alex, and myself, we sit down and we kind of go through our wild enrichment schedule and we talk about different potential ideas. And the tug of war one I had seen at a tiger rescue, I believe. I saw it online somewhere. And I remember thinking about it going, yeah, that would be really cool to do with the wolf dogs, but I just don't know how to set it up. If they'll like it, like if it'll be a massive flop, I don't know. And I remember I presented it to Georgina and Alex and they were both like, I don't know. I don't know if the people will be into it. I don't know if we could do it safely. I don't know if the wolf dogs will do it. So I had to do a bit of a sales pitch with them and they both kind of agreed, okay, like, we'll give you this one. We'll let you see if it works. And we kind of set up a bit of a trial run with, it was our Egadine pack. So Grizz and Aspen are in there. And I know Grizz, like, from having him for years, so he's pretty keen on stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, if anyone's going to be able to do it, it'll be Grizz. So we kind of set up a trial one with our own staff and it worked. It was like, okay, yeah, this is possible. So then it was from there, just a bit more of a revamp in terms of making sure that it's going to, be safe for the public, so that, Grizz isn't going to like drag someone across the ground or something like that.
This is true. Yep.
It just kind of, it wasn't a huge change, but just, putting in a few more safety things so that, Grizz didn't have the ability to yank the rope all the way through the enclosure fencing and stuff like that. But I'm pretty pumped that it worked well. The public seemed to really enjoy it. The dogs seemed to really enjoy it. So it was pretty well received all around. I kind of had a bit of a sigh of relief that this plan I had cooked up worked. And it is pretty interesting. Like watching it kind of take place and, seeing this vision carried through is one of the other many perks of my job or being here at the sanctuary. But it also gave me a few more ideas of some really different, interesting things we're going to do with some of the wolf dogs in the future too. So it was pretty cool that it kind of opened the door for a few more things like that.
That's awesome. I love that you guys are just so focused on making sure, again, the processes that you guys go through to make sure that it's the staging and the planning to make sure that it's safe and effective is just otherworldly. I think sometimes most, certain, people are just like, let's go and do it, as opposed to taking the right steps in order to make sure that things are okay. So what's next? I mean, I know obviously we're in the summertime now. Things should be getting set and you guys are building. You said you're building a little bit more. You have some new enrichment items. This is sort of the time for that. Are there any other how are the puppies doing? I guess I should ask. The 6 puppies that came and the 14 that came before that. Are the new rescues doing well? Any other future projects on the docket for you guys? What's sort of any other updates that maybe we didn't touch on?
Yeah. All the new rescues, yeah, everyone is settling in really well. We've got a few of them moved out into those larger permanent enclosures now. Like I mentioned, we got the first 3 pretty much done. One of the 3 is 100% done. We got a few wolf dogs moved into there. The next 2 are like really, really close. So we'll be kind of moving some of them out of those smaller short-term spots into those more permanent ones in the, next few weeks here. Yeah, those guys, as far as the 14, like they're from Warmland. Those guys, they're doing really well. There's a pretty big difference in terms of both content and personality across the board. That we had some really low contents, we had some high contents in there. So both in terms of content and personality, it's kind of a mix of everything there. So it's been fun seeing those guys and kind of learning them and building up the relationships between us and them as well. And then, yeah, figuring out a bit of matchmaker on our end as far as, which of these guys we're going to pair together. So we've done a bit of switching around and, trying different wolf dogs with different ones, which is always a very lengthy process. I can say we have never moved more wolf dogs in our entire lives than we have in the past month or so here, because it seems like we're constantly having to take this wolf dog from this rescue pen and we're going to move them over to this rescue pen so we can try these 2 together. It's been a lot of shuffling around over the last little while, but yeah, like we're definitely seeing a lot of improvement, a lot of focus, and things are definitely kind of trending really well in terms of getting these guys out into their bigger enclosures. The 6 pups has been, I don't even know how to word it. Like, it's so infrequent that we ever have puppies here. Again, being fully focused just on rescue, like, as you're probably aware, no one surrenders a puppy. Like, they're generally so easy
rare,
to look after. So typically 6 months plus is the soonest we've ever seen wolf dogs come in. So to have 6 of them show up at like 11 weeks was just like, wow, okay. They're all low content, so they're in some sense making it easier on us, but there is 6 of them and they definitely work as their own little pack. So I feel like it's always a bit of a challenge between making or feeling like I'm spending enough time with them, because I feel like I allot and put off a lot of time in the day to spend with them, but it seems like no matter how much time I'm spending with them, I wish it was more, because we've had a few losses this year, some of our wolf dogs getting older, some through some medical stuff. So to have these puppies show up when they did, it was like kind of just a real nice breath of fresh air. Like, to have that puppy energy and the 6 of them, like seeing their own different personalities and watching them grow up, it's been really quite incredible. And again, it's just we so infrequently have puppies here, so it's been really kind of enjoyable, I guess, more or less being a parent again, so to speak. Georgina and I always joke it's nice being a dad again or a mom again. And yeah, like it's been a lot of fun. Like they're just so hectic and so chaotic. I mean, like what puppy isn't? But when you mix 6 of them in there and they're kind of sharking around and doing things as their own little pack and feeding off one another, and yeah, making sure that we're giving them time apart from one another. We're putting them on some of our educational programs so that they can start seeing what that's like, introducing them to lots of different wolf dogs as well as some of our domestic dogs. So it's been a lot, but it's all been really, really fun, really enjoyable, as again, it's just something that we so infrequently have around here.
That's so awesome. I know exactly what you feel like, because we got a couple like when we rescued them roughly around the same age, maybe even younger than that. I think they were 2.5 months or 3 months old. Anyway, yeah, like when we did a rescue, low contents, but it really is just when they're rolling around and they're doing their puppy type things, you're like, okay, like you're right. It's so nice to see that, feel that, and it brings a whole new, I guess, energy to the pack that's already there. And the wolves and the wolf dogs that are already in their place, and like, oh, what's this going on? And it's really cool to see them assimilate as they grow old, at least for ours. I mean, you guys, I'm sure will see that as they continue to grow and find their way. Maybe if they stay in their own pack or move on to, get paired up or put into 3s or 4s. That could be really wild to see as that happens. I guess anything else that anybody wants to look at, I guess go to the Instagram, right? Go to your guys' website. Where are you guys doing most of the updates about the, any of the new enclosures, any enrichment items? Is that stuff you guys are pushing on social media? Where can they all see this exciting stuff that you guys are doing?
Yeah. So it seems to be pretty much everywhere. I'd say like our website's pretty up to date. Both Facebook and Instagram, they all receive similar content. So those are really great ways to kind of stay up to date with what we have kind of on the go. I'd obviously recommend visiting in person. You're going to see a lot more than you ever would, get a better impression of the space and everything we have going on than you would ever over social media. But if that's not possible, then yeah, I mean, social media, we're doing our best to keep that stuff up to date. We have Sarah here now who's kind of managing all our social media, which has been a huge help, because between myself doing it previously, then Alex trying to take it over, plus everything else going on, it's that always seemed to fall off. So having Sarah here handling that now has been really awesome. So yeah, she's doing a great job as far as keeping that stuff up to date and trying to really showcase all the different stuff we have going on.
That's awesome. That's tremendous. My last thing for you, Joel, is when you hear the word wolf, what's the thing that comes to your mind?
Oh, that is such a good question. I'd have to say just probably the true, in my opinion, just a true wild spirit, just something that is so truly unique and individually its own thing. There's a lot of wolves out there in the wild, and I mean, even working with wolf dogs, no two are alike, but they're all kind of alike. So I think for me, that's probably when I think of a wolf, or the word wolf, just real, true, raw, wild nature, I think would be what comes to mind for me anyway.
That's awesome. Joel Cates, everybody, from Yamnuska. Listen, thank you for everything that you're doing individually there, and you guys as a team to really educate and help these wolf dogs as much as you can, building the enclosures and getting, utilizing your space so well to help any of these pups that are in need up there. And I know there's a lot. And you guys do the best you can, and you're really good at it. So thank you guys so much for all that you do up there, and being a good partner with with us down here in the States. Really appreciate you guys.
Well, thanks so much. For all the kind words, obviously the acknowledgement. I mean, it really means a lot coming from someone who really knows what the reality of sanctuary and rescue life is like. I don't think anyone really has an idea of what it's actually like until you really get in there and live it. So from someone who knows it, again, thank you so much. And right back at you. You guys are doing such a fantastic job. I know when Georgina first got on her podcast, I was so excited for her. And then when this opportunity came up, I was like, what? No way. I was so excited about it. So thank you so much for having me on. And again, for all the stuff you guys are doing down there as well.
I appreciate that, Joel. Thank you, my man. Just hang tight while I sign off. How's to you all out there? We'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.